Episode 51. Former NFL football player, magician, and all-around great guy, Jon Dorenbos. Welcome to The Art of Excellence, a show about people doing extraordinary things in their lives. I'm your host, Glenn Zweig. Thanks for joining me. My guest today is Jon Dorenbos. Jon is a former professional football player and magician. He played for 14 seasons in the NFL as a long snapper with the Tennessee Titans and the Philadelphia Eagles. He had a parallel career as a magician and was a finalist in America's Got Talent, placing third overall amongst tens of thousands of competitors. He is a regular guest on the Ellen DeGeneres Show, and his new book is called Life is Magic, My Inspiring Journey from Tragedy to Self-Discovery. Jon, welcome to the show.
Hey, this is Rockstar. Thanks for having me.
Jon, your story is one of the most heartbreaking and at the same time heartwarming stories I've ever encountered. So up until your 12th birthday, life in the Dorenbos house was pretty normal by all accounts. I mean, how would you describe it?
As normal as any kid would want it to be. So I looked up to both my parents. My dad was my hero. I was a kid that wanted to grow up and be just like his dad. He coached my Little League teams. He was the president of the Little League. We played catch every single day. And now keep in mind, I was 12 years old at the time. So I was also at the age where him and I were able to hang out. And, he was teaching me how to change a tire and change the oil. And then my mom volunteered at the school and created a reading program for kids like me who really struggled with reading comprehension. And so my mom taught me that, hey, you could be different and still be cool in this world and still contribute. So I looked up to both my parents.
So they were very involved in your life. They cared deeply about you, it sounds like. And as I understand, they rarely fought, right? It was a relatively peaceful household.
Yeah, it was my sister, my brother, and I. And very rarely did we see my parents argue.
So, there you are living the normal, stereotypical childhood, if you will. And then just 12 days after your 12th birthday, August 2nd, 1992, the most unfathomable, horrific tragedy happens, and your life would be forever altered in a blink of an eye. So can you walk me through how that day unfolded?
So I was across the street at some friend's house. We were all playing in the backyard. And on the patio, now look, this is before cell phones and pagers and all that. So on our patio, we had a bell. And my parents would ring the bell, and that meant it was time to come home. And so I heard the bell ring, and I went home. My dad and I hung out, and I said, hey, where's mom? And he said she went for a walk with some friends. So my dad and I hung out. We played some games. I went to bed, woke up the next morning at 6 a.m., and my dad had everything laid out for a baseball camp I was going to. And so naturally, I said, hey, where's mom? Oh, well, she went swimming at the club with her friends. And I said, okay. So I grabbed my stuff, and I left. I was picked up at noon the next day there from baseball camp and found out I was driven to the police station and found out that the night before, right before that bell had rung, my dad had murdered my mom in the garage of our house.
Just like that.
Yeah. And it was not pretty. He used a bench grinder and a sledgehammer, and they got in an argument, and she didn't come out.
Jon, I remember reading the passage, and I had to reread it over and over and over again. It's almost like I couldn't believe what I was reading. So I can't imagine what it was like just hearing those words. Did it even sink in? Or
no? When I was taken to the police station, I was originally told that they had gotten in an argument and that she was pushed down the stairs and she didn't make it. My dad was being held for questioning. And even throughout the trial, and even when the facts are starting to come out and you're realizing that this was a really bad crime and this was murder, you still don't believe it. And you still think that, well, one, I lost my mom. And two, I was on the verge of losing my dad as well. And the whole time, I'm sure the adults, my aunt, who's all on my mom's side of the family, my aunt, my grandparents, they see the reality sooner than I did as a kid. And the whole time I think my dad's coming home. I think this whole thing's a bad dream, and whether my mom lived or died or whatever, my dad's still going to come home and everything's going to be okay and we're going to figure it out. And so the reality that I lost both parents, it takes years. I mean, my sister and I went through the most intense therapy you could imagine. And every day you wake up, you think it's a nightmare. And you hope that when you wake up in the morning, it's just never happened.
Could you tell me about your mom? Like, what was she like? What do you remember most about her?
She was a stay-at-home mom that loved being a mom. She could not have been more involved in my life, my sister's life, my brother's life. Her laugh, her smile, her sense of humor. And you know what? It's one of those things that as I got older and you start reflecting and you start reading the journal entries that I wrote when I was a kid, and all these memories start coming back, she never met a stranger. Everywhere she went, she just put a smile on people's faces, and everybody always wanted to talk to her. And she had a way with people. And I think she's one of those people that just loved people and loved talking with people and loved sharing with people. And she was the woman that you just wanted to be around because her presence made you feel better about yourself.
So, Jen, I lost my mom to cancer when I was in college. And it was certainly the most agonizing event I had ever lived through. Not to sugarcoat it in any way, but at least I had had a couple years while she was battling the disease to try to come to terms and, say goodbye to her, properly, as hard as that was. So I can't even start to imagine what this must have been like for you. And, in all candor, I'm at a loss with how to even ask questions about it without just sounding trivial and cliche. So maybe you could just simply share with me, what that aftermath was like. I mean, how does a, really good, wholesome kid deal with such a terrifying incident? It's such an impressionable age. I mean, how do you even just get on with life?
Well, you just said the key word, an impressionable age. And for me, I was 12 when the trial was over and all that, soon to be 13. And I had my aunt, who's my mom's sister, and my grandparents, who's my mom's parents, and my sister. And we all rallied. We came together. Now, because my sister and I weren't 18 yet, I was 12, 13. My sister was 15. The state still had kind of some control of us. And between my family and the state, they got us into therapy that was the most intense therapy you could possibly imagine. And so for a year and a half, my sister and I lived in a temporary foster home together and went through this process in therapy. And you said it, it's an impressionable age. So I was at an age where people around me wanted me to succeed. People around me wanted to see me come out of this. And they gave me all the resources to do just that. And that's what we did. My sister and I dove into therapy and realized that this is our reality. And we just took it head on every single day.
Your father was sentenced to 13 years in prison. I think it was shortly after the sentencing, you had kept a journal. And in the journal, you wrote this really moving letter to your mother. Could you share part of that with me?
Yeah. So, part of the therapy was we wrote in our journals every single day. And part of that was to discover communication within ourselves, how to take your heart and your mind and put it into words and start a life of intentional living. And so when my dad was sentenced, I wrote a letter to both my dad and my mom. And part of the letter I wrote to my mom was, someday, Mom, I will be in heaven and I will ask you what happened. Thank you for the best 12 years of my life. Thank you for helping in my school, being a great, helpful citizen in Woodinville, and many more things you did to help other people. I wish you could have done things for yourself, like finish college and start your own business. You were the best mother any person could want. I love you a whole bunch, Mom. Love, your loving son, Jonathan.
Thank you for sharing that. Is it hard to read that now?
I would say emotional more than difficult. There were parts of the therapy and parts of coming to terms with your own reality that are hard at the beginning. And then once you come to terms with what's going on and once you come to terms with your own reality, I don't know if hard is the word I would describe it, but emotional. I hope that never goes away. It should always be emotional.
So during this time, John, you also had some mixed emotions about your father and felt that you were missing him. You sort of came to realize that you weren't really missing your dad per se. You were missing who you thought he was, a distorted version of reality, so to speak. So I guess what was the vision of your father that you were missing?
That right there is a really deep concept. And as a kid who's trying to figure out this horrible tragedy that just happened, you wake up every day with different feelings. You wake up angry one day, you wake up bitter one day, you wake up happy, remembering good memories one day, you wake up delusional one day thinking that, oh, my dad's innocent, he's coming home, I don't know what these people are talking about. Then you wake up and all of a sudden you get a hard slap in the face of reality of what he did. And so not only was I trying to figure out what was going on, but I lost my mother. I'm coming to terms with that. And now I'm coming to terms with watching my dad fade away in my life because of what he did. And that's hard. And as a kid, you sit back and you remember all the good things. And so that's what you remember. And that's what you hold on to. That's the person that you want to remember. And that's the person that you want to come home. And then I was trying to come to terms with what an evil act he did, and then try to figure out, well, who is he really? You know, if people said, "Hey, do you love your dad?" Well, yeah, of course I do. And then they say, "Well, he murdered your mom. Do you love the person that murdered your mom?" And you're like, "Wait, no. How could I love that person? No." So the internal and emotional conflict between the two hitting each other head on, that's what, when you're 12 and 13 years old, that's what throws you into a loop.
I know you have this belief that you should talk to yourself, like not listen to yourself, talk to yourself. And you explained it. It's the tendency that all of us have to believe that voice in our head rather than step back and hold the myths we tell ourselves up to inspection. So can you peel that back, this notion of talking versus listening and how that's helpful?
Yeah. So I never knew how to put that into words. That wasn't until later in life. But from the moment I started writing in my journal, I started talking out loud, and then I would read out loud. And I realized that the narrative that I tell myself is going to be my own reality. And I think there's moments I know for a fact, even to this day, there's moments in my life where there's a voice in my head that either it doubts myself, it tells myself I can't do something. It's just a negative voice. And every one of us have it. All of a sudden we become a victim. All of a sudden we get better at life. And it's like, oh my gosh, life is kicking me down. And why is it always me? And blah, 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 blah. So I choose not to listen to that voice. And instead, I stand up and I talk to myself out loud on where I want to go, what I want to do, who I want to be, and the things that are going to change in my life for the good. How do I want to change my life? And I say these words out loud. Literally, I say them out loud to myself as I walk around. And so, one, I'm telling myself where I'm going. And two, my mind is hearing it. And pretty soon, that voice in the back of my mind of becoming a victim in this world and all the negative things in life that I feel like life's ganging up on me, that voice quiets. And the next thing you know, you project yourself where you're going.
So sometime after your dad's passing, you're at a house. They have sort of an amateur magic show, and you were just mesmerized by the magic. Like you were just instantly hooked. But the world of magic for you was more than just cool tricks. It seems like it was almost some kind of therapy for you in a way, like it helped you heal. Could you explain that?
It 100% did. And, when I first saw magic, it was the coolest thing in the world. Now, look, I wish I was cooler. I wish I saw Hendrix or Clapton or Stevie Ray or like an awesome guitar player and I could jam, but I saw a card guy and I saw a magician. What was happening was every time I shuffled cards and I sat at a table, the world quieted. It was the one time when I was a kid that I was just a kid, that I wasn't worried about losing both my parents, that I had lived in a temporary foster home, that I moved in with my Aunt Susan, and that, all these things that I had gathered as a kid I had to get rid of in an estate sale, and all these things that you don't want to worry about or think about as a kid. When I would shuffle cards, all that faded away, and I was just lost in the moment of being a kid. And that feeling right there got me through. That feeling of freedom, that feeling of not worrying about adult issues, because this was also before, the internet, before YouTube and all this. So when I was a kid, our exposure to information was a lot less. So when this tragedy happened, I didn't even know what murder was. Like kids our age we didn't know what that was. And so magic saved me.
It's interesting. And I don't know how much of it was being, if you've heard this term, the flow state, just something to redirect your mind and your focus, or if it was the fact that magic was almost removing you. I mean, it's magic. It's removing you from the reality of this world into some sort of fantasy-like world.
100%. And that's what it did. And so to me, I wrote this book called Life is Magic. And that title of the book is much deeper than just, oh, John's a magician, he's doing tricks. To me, life is magic, and it's the ability to step out, right? And it's the ability to quiet the noise around us. It's the ability to talk to ourselves and not listen to ourselves. Magic introduced me to that whole world. Magic introduced me to this world of locking yourself in a room and almost meditation in a way. Like if you think about it, me sitting down at a table and shuffling cards and hearing the click of the cards and hearing the ripple of the shuffle, that's my moment of meditation. That's my moment that the magic happens. And it's magic happening in my soul.
Well, you really took to it, and you'd go from performing in front of a mirror in your bedroom to performing all over the country and eventually becoming a finalist on America's Got Talent. So what's the key, I guess, to becoming a world-class magician? Is it something anyone can do if they commit the time? You know, like it's one of those 10,000 hour kind of things? Or is there some special gift that you also need to have, whether it's, I don't know, sleight of hand talent or showmanship or something like that?
I think that's a big answer. And what I mean by that is, what makes you you? Why do I want to watch you? Why do I care? And in music, there's 12 notes, and how you interpret that, that's who you are as an artist. And so as a magician, who are you and why do I care? And so, yeah, do you need 10,000 hours of practice? You better believe it. Like, you got to be good. Like, you got to hold your chops. But then when you're on stage and the world's watching, how do you captivate them? How do you separate yourself? Are you just another person trying to be another David Copperfield? Or is there something about you that I gravitate to? And what I realize is this: I want to be a rock star, but I can't sing, I can't dance, and I can't play an instrument. So check that off.
So much for right.
Yeah. So oops. But here's what I learned: that whether it's magic, whether it's comedy, whether it's music, it's just a tool. And if it's your end all be all, then to me, it's a dead end. Meaning this: if my magic trick is the end all be all to my performance, then you're going to get a golf clap. But instead, if I use magic as my tool to connect to an audience, to actually create an emotion, to create an experience, well, now it's not all about the magic. Now it's about the whole experience of why we're there. And, you know, when I perform, I really try and create acts and ballads, if you will, that make people think, that make people reflect, that make people want to change their life in a positive, that after after I'm done performing, I hope that you leave my show feeling better about yourself than when you got there. And I read a quote by George Carlin, who was quoting somebody else. So I forgot the original person who said this, but they said, I don't care what you do. They're not going to remember exactly what you said. They're not going to remember exactly what you did, but they're going to remember the way you made them feel. And that's why they're going to come back again. So for me, magic is a tool to connect to an audience. And because I wanted to be a rock star, that's what I try and do. I try and make it rock star.
Wow. Well, you'd soon discover your second passion, which is football, of course. So here's a quote I really enjoyed from the book. If magic unlocked my soul, football gave me a more earthly outlet. On the field, all this pent-up emotion flowed out of me. Each time I leveled someone, it was like turning a valve that released some energy that had been building up for years. So, John, sounds like the sport was as therapeutic for you as magic, but maybe in a slightly different way.
Yeah. So what ended up happening is my buddy Kevin Johansson came to me and said, "Hey, John, so now we're freshmen in high school. John, you should play football." I go, "Nah, I'm good." He goes, "No, you really should." I go, "I don't want to play football. Look, football's for dorks. I like magic." And then the next thing you know, I'll never forget, he said, "But you can hit that guy and not get in trouble." Whoa, that sounds pretty cool. So what happened is during the day, I could get out my aggression. And the reality is, if you met me, I was a happy kid. I wanted to make the best of myself in life. I wanted to bring pride back to my last name. But you still have these issues that are building up inside of you. And so football gave me a natural outlet of aggression. I could hit people, I could run around. And then I would go home and I would sit at a card table, light a candle, turn on Yanni, track number 9, Felista on repeat. And I would shuffle cards. I had the perfect balance in my teenage years of being able to play sports and football and then being able to shuffle, get out aggression, heal the soul.
Well, we talk about the aggression, but you also mentioned how sports is as much about attitude as it is about physicality. And you were mentioning how while others are quitting left and right, there you are gutting it out and never giving up. So I'm curious where that determination and inner strength comes from. Like, do you think your mom's death fueled your desire in some way, or was that drive always there from a young age?
I think so. And I think it was also the year and a half of therapy. I think it was all of a sudden having an old soul at a young age. And I think I had a deep appreciation for life at a younger age than probably most kids do, just because of life experience.
Mm.
Most kids didn't have to grow up the way I did at such a young age. And so at a young age, I knew that I wanted to make something of myself because I knew that who knows when my day is going to come. And there's a lot in this world to do. And I had a deep passion for wanting to bring pride back to my last name. When people heard the last name Dorenbos, I wanted them to think of greatness and not what my dad did.
Well, so you decided your best shot at playing in the NFL was as a long snapper. That was your dream to get to the NFL. But this long snapper, it's a position I think you hadn't even played in high school or that community college you first went to, or maybe you did just a little bit of it. And you knew that you had to play for a Division I school to get notice by the NFL. So, I mean, Jon, given that you literally had next to no experience, you had to somehow come up with a plan to get picked up by one of these bigger schools. So, I'd like to call this a bit of real life magic. What was this plan that you came up with?
Well, so I thought I was a pretty good player, right? And so I ended up going to a junior college that ultimately lost 40 games in a row, which not a lot of kids are getting recruited out of that school. And so I had long snapped my senior year in high school, but I didn't do it in junior college. And so I was putting my highlight tape together and it was pretty good. And I basically thought, well, as I'm putting my tape together, and again, this is before the internet, before HD cameras, it's VHS, it's grainy. As long as we're all white guys, who knew? And so I basically took some highlights of my buddy Nick Heinley hitting people really, really hard. And then we had a long snapper named Tim Thurman, and I took some of his snapping from the junior college and I put it on my tape and I said I was all three of us. Now, I knew, now here's the deal. I knew I was good enough. Like I knew that I could do it. I just needed an opportunity. And so that's what I did.
But Jon, you literally conned your way.
Hold on. Look, I didn't Lori Loughlin this thing. Okay. Like I knew I could do it. I just didn't have the footage.
I got you. It was 100% complete fabrication. I think it's brilliant. I love it. And, I try to keep the show pretty clean, but honestly, for lack of a better word, it took some balls, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But okay. Looking back, yeah, it did. But in the moment, I didn't think of it that way. And in the moment, I really didn't think I was doing anything wrong because I knew I could play. Like I knew I was good enough. I just needed to get in the door. And so, it took balls, but I guess when you're living in the moment, you're just trying to make something of yourself and make something better than where you came from. You're just going to do whatever it takes. And that's what I did.
Well, for those who don't follow football, what exactly is the long snapper and why did you go that route? It's generally a role that's masked in anonymity, right? So what was the draw for you?
Yeah, so the long snapper, a lot of people, whether you know football or not, there's a guy that kicks the ball. Everybody, the kicker. Yeah, I got it. Okay, so then there's a guy that sometimes holds the ball on the ground for the guy that kicks it. I'm neither one of those guys. I'm not nearly that cool as those guys. I'm the guy that looks between my legs and snaps a football to the guy that catches it to hold it for the guy that kicks it. So that's what's called a long snapper. I don't think it was so much I was seeking out to be that. My buddy Paul Tessier went to UTEP and said, hey, we need a long snapper. And so when I was putting my tape together, there was the opportunity. I just didn't have film of me actually doing it, but I knew I could do it. And so I put that on there. And sure enough, I put Tim Thurman snapping a few balls on there. And University of Texas, El Paso needed a snapper and said, let's do this. And I got a full ride. And it kind of just happened.
But why did you choose that? Why the long snapper?
Well, because one, I could do it. And I knew that not a lot of people could. And then two, University of Texas, El Paso, where my buddy Paul was at, they needed a long snapper. And so for me, it was about filling a void. It was
got it.
And so, look, here's what I learned. I had a coach that played in the NFL for a long time in high school. His name was Bill Simpson, one of the greatest coaches ever. And he basically said, the more you can do, kid, hey, the more you can do. And so I basically was filling a void that a team needed. And I just had to show them that I could do it. I just didn't really have anything to show them at the time.
But couldn't you find a school that had a quarterback void?
I know, right? I would have made a lot more money.
Oh, gosh. So So what are the ingredients for being a successful long snapper? I mean, what separates the good from the great?
It's a great question, and I think this comes back to me as a kid and being in therapy and having an extreme sense of self and emotional awareness of who I am and what I want and where I want to be. To me, the mental attributes that make a good specialist, which would be a kicker, punter, or a long snapper, you got to be able to process things. You got to be able to have closure quick. You got to be able to forgive. You got to be able to move on. Because I'm in a position where I might play 10 plays a game, which means in 3 hours, I might play 10, which means I play 6 seconds and then I go sit on the bench for 10, 12 minutes. And so if something doesn't go perfect, you better be able to process that and get rid of it and go out there and execute the very next play or you're fired. And so to be able to have kind of a mental toughness about you, about not really caring what other people think and being able to move on after a good play or a bad play is key. And then physically, I was always super flexible and I'm pretty strong. Like I was 6 foot, 250 pounds when I played, but I was strong and very, very flexible. And so you have to kind of generate power out of a very awkward position. And I was just able to do it.
You paid tribute in the book to a sports psychologist, Dr. Kevin Elko, who helped give you a lot of that mental edge. So what did you learn from him? Anything in addition to what you were just talking about there?
Yeah. And it was also his ability to kind of frame my life up into words. Don't listen to yourself, talk to yourself. Like that's an Elkoism. And he basically was like, I've never seen anybody quite like you that is able to not listen to themselves and instead talk to themselves. And it just lit up. Like everything this guy tells me, it just makes sense, right? Because it's how I've lived my life. Even from a point of what he refers to as negative reinforcement, meaning this, John, what do you think about before you go snap a football before a game? Oh man, sometimes I'd be like, man, just don't screw up. Oh, there you go. Stop. That's negative reinforcement. You're listening to the negative voice in your head and you're trying to convince yourself it's not there. Quiet it and talk to yourself. By you saying, don't screw up, you're reinforcing the negative. Instead, say fire it in there. Sure enough, I started to change the words. Now it's the same goal, right? But get rid of all the negative. Project where you want to go. And boom, there it is, fired in there. And so before every snap, that's what I said.
I want to talk about a different aspect of the game. You seem to have a little bit of animosity toward the data-driven nature of the game, to where, a lot of sports are going. You felt, as my interpretation was, that you felt sports science had maybe encroached too far. So here's a quote from the book. Give me the guy who has holes in his boots, who drives a beat-up truck, who drinks a beer in one gulp, and who, when you look at his wife the wrong way, just knocks you out and then goes back eating a rare steak. That's the guy I want, rather than the guy hooked up to wires, running on a perfectly smooth track attached to a parachute. So how do you really feel?
Yeah, right. That is also true and metaphoric in the same sense. It's about who is going to overcome adversity quicker. Who is going to be able to deal with outside variables that aren't projected quicker? It's the guy that's not. Look, I think sports science is great, but I think when it becomes the reason why, then no, because it doesn't measure the heart of a man. And let me tell you this, or a woman. And I believe this, that if you were to line me up, because I was told by sports science people, oh, guess what? My knee to ankle ratio is not good enough. My speed's not good enough. This isn't good enough. Like why do I need to know that? Line up, put a helmet on, let me hit you. And then we'll find out who's going to keep standing up. Because to me, one of my goals was always to be the oldest guy on the team. And if I did that, then guess what? Then that means that I was a true pro and I showed up every single day and I lasted longer than anybody else because I continued to get up. I don't care how hard you're going to hit me. I'm going to continue to stand up. And to me, there's things that sports science can't measure.
So you played for the Eagles, Philadelphia Eagles, for over a decade, 11 seasons, I think. And then you were traded to New Orleans. When you are traded in the NFL, there's a mandatory physical that you have to go through before you can start. And when they did yours, they actually found something very serious called an aortic aneurysm. It was a life-threatening heart condition. You had to have emergency surgery, and your football career, just like that, was officially over. In fact, the doctor said that had you played one more game, there was a better than 50% chance that you would have died on the field. So how do you take all that in? Was it sadness that the career had just ended? Was it feeling fortunate that, they caught this condition before it's too late? Or maybe even anger that, my God, like you had to suffer through this ordeal after all you'd been through in life?
Well, so at that time, I was 37 years old. I had been traded to New Orleans, and a lot of things were going my way. And even to the simple aspects. I was excited that I was traded to a team in all black uniforms because for a 37-year-old pudgy athlete, you're looking slimming. So for the first time in my career, I've been in the Northeast my whole career, and the first time I was traded to a team with a dome, which means 13 to 16 games indoors. I had just signed a 3-year extension for millions, more money than I'd ever seen. And I'd just been married for 2 months. And so a lot of things were going right. Like I was literally like, just life is rolling. And so when I got the news that, one, I'm never playing football ever again, my career's over, and you're going to be in emergency open heart surgery in the next 48 hours, it's not what you expect to hear. And here comes the moment that I don't care how much money you have. I don't care what race you are, what religion. I don't care what you do for a living. It's the moment that I believe that every one of us will forever relate to. And it's the moment where life's going good. We've got our own plan. And all of a sudden it just comes and it just kicks us. And then all of a sudden we get thrown to the ground by life, and life keeps stepping on us. And there's a decision that must be made in that moment. Do we live in vision, or do we live in circumstance? Do you let life dictate where you're going and make excuses and become a victim? Or do you stand up, quiet the voice in your own head, don't listen to yourself, and talk to yourself? And in that moment, I think we're both those people. So sure, I had the moment of all of a sudden I was a victim. All of a sudden I got bitter. All of a sudden I got angry. And I started realizing that I've worked too hard for my career. This is not the way I'm going out. And then I had to change the story in my own head. And when you change the narrative and you start talking to yourself, that's when you come out of it. And that's what I did.
Is that easy for you to change the narrative, or it's quite a struggle to do so?
I've done it my whole life. And so I don't know if easy is the word as much as sometimes emotional. And I go back to that a lot, because hard and easy is what is perceived. And so if you tell yourself something's hard, then guess what? It's hard. I love this quote. Ready for this? What do these two people have in common? The person that says I can and the person that says I can't. They're both right. So now if you make it hard in your own mind, then guess what? It's hard. If you make it easy in your own mind, then it's probably going to be easier than what you thought. But either way, it's emotional. And so it was emotional for me because I remembered in 2006. So here's what happens. I get diagnosed. I'm finding out I'm having heart surgery. My career's over. And I sat down, and amongst feeling bitter and angry, I told myself I got to rewrite my story. And I remember Joe Santoliquito, who was a reporter. And in 2006, he told me that he read an article that my mom's best friend sang "Wind Beneath My Wings" at her funeral. And he said, "Congratulations on becoming an eagle, because now life just came full circle. And when you're struggling, just open your wings and let the wind take you." The song says, "I can fly higher than an eagle. You're the wind beneath my wings." And that took me. And so now all of a sudden I'm in New Orleans, the New Orleans Saints. And a guy walked by me with the last name Breeze. So Drew Brees is the quarterback for the Saints. He's the cool guy. He's the guy that everybody wants to be, nicest person in the world. But I saw his last name Breeze. And then there it is. There's the moment to rewrite your story. And I told myself that my mom just sent me a message. She said, "Guess what, kid? It's time to step out of the wind. You're traded to New Orleans to have your life saved by a Saint. And all you had to do is step out of the wind and catch a breeze." Drew Brees was my breeze. And so when you all of a sudden start writing the narrative and making life a little bit more romantic, it's easier to grasp on the bigger picture.
It's really fascinating to me that you're a professional. I mean, truly a professional in two entirely different fields, football and magic. I was sort of curious reading through the book, are there parallels between your success on the football field and up on the stage? Like any common threads when you think about the two?
Yeah, I'm passionate about both. And when I'm all in, I'm all in. When I'm a part of your team, I promise you I'm going to give you everything I got. And it comes back to wanting to be the oldest guy on the team. And in that goal, especially in sports, so for me, when I got into sports, that was my family. That was a sense of family for me. And that was a sense for this family to look at me and expect better out of me and give me an opportunity to show my new family that no matter what, I'm going to come through for them. And so in both of them, you're surrounding yourself with a group of people to achieve success. And you're surrounding yourself with a group of people that are counting on you in every aspect of your way. And what it did for me is it forces me to have a higher standard of accountability for myself than anybody has for me. That's the way it should be. People around me can't want better than I want for myself. It doesn't work that way. I have to want better for me, knowing that ultimately it's because I want better for everybody around me. And when I say that, I want to be the oldest guy in the team, for me, it means that the owner or the coach would look at me and say, hey, guess what, kid? No matter what, there's nobody else I would have wanted here but you for all these years. And that is the biggest compliment that an athlete or a professional can have. And so the common threads, it takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of passion. And it takes a drive to want to be great and change the world.
I want to come back to your father for a minute, because throughout all the success that you had, the magic and the football and getting on with your life, something had continued to weigh you down. And you realized that it was not forgiving your dad. You felt that you had to forgive your dad to be truly free and to move on. Jon, for the life of me, I just can't understand how you're able to forgive someone who did something like that to you. And I know they say forgiveness is liberating. It just doesn't make sense to me, but I know it was really important. So could you share what you were feeling and why was it so important? And what did it do, if you did forgive him, what did it do to you after you forgave him?
Yeah. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What does forgiveness mean to you? The act of it. What is it if you have to define the perception of what forgiveness is within you, how would you describe forgiveness?
That's a really good question. You're forgiving someone means you're being okay with what they did.
So I've been in a position that I've been able to talk to a lot of people about this issue, about the issue of forgiveness and closure. Guess what? What I've learned, and myself included, I was in this world, is that forgiveness has this feeling of, if I forgive you, that means that the score's even. It means I wave the white flag and you win. Mm-hmm. So I realized that forgiveness for a lot of people, it's about winning and losing. It's about, if I forgive you, then that means I'm okay with what you did. We can go on and be buddies. And guess what? I surrender. Well, I had to rewrite the definition of what forgiveness means to me and believe it and be okay with it. And what I mean by that is, what I realized for me, forgiveness had nothing to do with my dad. It had nothing to do with winning and losing. It had nothing to do with me saying, I'm okay with what you did, because I'm never going to be okay with what he did. But for me, forgiveness was about getting rid of a little tiny voice in the back of my head that still had a cloud, that still had anger, that still had resentment, and still was kind of putting weight on my shoulders on a daily basis. For me, forgiveness was about not letting that and somebody that is no longer in my life affect my life. Think about this. This could be you. It could be somebody you know. But I know that all of us can relate to the idea that there is an event that happened in either our life or someone that we know, or a person that entered someone's life that is no longer in their life, but still affects their life years later. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So who's winning? So if forgiveness is about winning and losing, well, that doesn't make sense to me, because that person or that event is still affecting you in a negative way. You're losing. So now all of a sudden, forgiveness to me, knowing that it meant nothing to do about the other person, it was about me coming to terms with my reality, me being at peace with my reality. And you ready for this? Here was the epiphany that I had. It was about me finding motivation in the worst thing that ever happened to me, to change it and to make it better for the people that are going to come after me. And if I can do that, that's what forgiveness is to me. It doesn't mean that we're buddies. It doesn't mean that I want to have a relationship with you. It doesn't mean that I agree with what you did. But instead, I basically forgave my dad for being lost and for making a mistake, because those are two things that I can wrap my head around that I've done many times. And you know what? That's what he did. He was lost in life and he made a really bad mistake. I had thought about forgiving my dad for a long time, and I had thought about wanting to see him for a long time. But for whatever reason, nothing in life stemmed action. And then when my wife got pregnant with our daughter, I realized that weeks before my daughter was born, it was time. We have friends that don't have relationships with their dad, and they reached out. Either the dad passed away or they just never met him, right? And so I realized, and I read a quote, that nothing comes easy and you don't grow unless it's hard. And so I wanted to take the road less traveled, and I wanted to do something very difficult to grow. And I think sometimes we have to make decisions that are not easy and that are emotional. And so me deciding to go see my dad and finding forgiveness for my dad was actually me trying to make this world a better place for my daughter. It almost stemmed from a higher calling, than it was worth something bigger than me. Like I had to step out of my own mind, my own soul. I had to step out of my own way to find this, to be there for my daughter. And when I went to find forgiveness and when I went to go meet my dad, I wanted to relive that relationship. I wanted to look at him in the face, and I wanted to feel all the hurt, the anger, the pain. I wanted to think about everything that happened during that time and everything that happened from that time until the present, and think about what relationship, what it means to be a father son, what it means to be a dad, what that relationship could have been, what that relationship should have been. And instead of making excuses of why I'm going to be a deadbeat dad, and instead of not being the dad I should be, I'm going to push all that aside and I'm going to quiet that voice. And instead, I'm going to pull motivation out of the worst thing that ever happened to me. And I'm going to change the narrative of this world. And so me forgiving my dad was about me finding motivation to be the dad I never had. And it was about me being a dad for my daughter that I wish I had. And I think that's a powerful thing.
That's very powerful. This is a hypothetical coming at you here, and I know it's impossible to answer, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you have any sense as to how your mom's death maybe shifted the trajectory of your life? Like, in other words, if you could go back in time and this never happened, your mom was with you throughout your childhood, she's with you today, would we still be having this interview, you as a professional football player and a magician and all these things? Or do you think your life might have somehow turned out differently?
Well, it's the butterfly effect, right?
Yeah.
I've actually had this conversation with friends, and I wonder if I would have just been a degenerate druggie, just stuck up, spoiled. You never know. But the reality is life happens, and you do the best you can with it. And so I would like to think that it would have ended up this way, but who knows?
Well, you mentioned becoming, this druggie. What's interesting is, I think, given what happened, had you become this depressed alcoholic, I don't think it would have been a surprise. Like, I don't think that part of the story would look, out of place, given what you had been through. But yet, it's not the case. I mean, you've got this infectious charm and positive energy and outlook in life, and it's really contagious. So what do you attribute that to? Do you think it was just something inside you? It was the therapy?
Here it is. It's what story do you choose to grasp onto? Now, if I choose to live in my dad's world, meaning that affects me more than my mom's, well, then that's the path I'm going to go down. So instead of spending time thinking about all the negative, I don't do that. I can't. I don't want to live that life. So instead, I think about all the things that my mom would have done with her life. And, my sister and my brother and I were all her dreams. So how can we make this world a better place and live in her memory? I think about that all day, every day. And I don't go there and think about the negative thing that my dad did. Instead, I'm going to continue the legacy of my mom.
The name of this podcast is The Art of Excellence. I always like to ask my guests how they define the word excellence. What does it mean to you?
Show up. You want to be great? You want to be excellent? You want to separate yourself from the rest of the world? It's very easy. Show up. Show up every day. Show up on time. Show up ready to work, and watch how many people jump off the path. And what do I mean by that? How do you become the oldest guy in the team? You show up, and you show up every day. I wanted to play college football. I wanted to play college football for a number of reasons. But one of the reasons is I wanted to be a rock star. I told you that. And I wanted to run out of a tunnel in front of 100,000 people. It was that simple. And in order to do that, I had to show up every day. And what I learned is people jump off the path. People get distracted, excuses, drugs, kids, grades. It didn't matter. But I just watched all these great athletes around me just disappear. Because guess what? For whatever reason, acceptable or not, they stop showing up. So to me, if you want to be a champion, just show up and watch what happens.
I like that. The name of the book again is Life is Magic, My Inspiring Journey from Tragedy to Self-Discovery. I'd say my favorite book of the year. It was it almost was 3 books in one, really, 3 different chapters in your life. Jon, cannot tell you what an honor this has been to spend the time with you. Thank you for being on the show.
Hey man, anytime. Thank you for having me, and hopefully we can do it again.
Hey, thanks for listening. Okay, don't go yet, please. 2 favors. I ask simply 2 favors. 1, if you could please download the iTunes app. You could do it on your phone. You can do it on the computer. Take 60 seconds and leave a review. It means a lot. 2, you can find my episodes on several social media sites, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. Find the one that you like the most. Find the one where you tend to have a lot of friends and followers. And if you could please either share it in the case of Facebook and LinkedIn, or retweet it on Twitter, that would mean the world to me. So those are the 2 asks I have. I love putting together this podcast. I hope you enjoy listening to it. Thank you so much, and I will see you again next time. Bye-bye.